This is the website that I told you to take some notes, and I have some different pages here under the technical context menu. And for example, I want to start right away with some E2E test automation tools like Cypress and Playwright. So let's see what kind of notes I have for Cypress. Here I have some notes to install from the npm site, which is the package manager for the JavaScript environment. And then after doing some installations, we can just start coding with Cypress. So let me show in practice how it looks like. I have a project here. Here I use IntelliJ for my development environment. And after you install Cypress, you will have a folder like this. So I already have it in my environment, so I will not show the installation steps again, but it will be just like npm install Cypress. That would be it. And after you install, you will see the Cypress folder here under your root directory. And then you will see the integration folder under which you are supposed to add your test cases, the automated test scenarios. And there will be some plugins folder and a support folder. And of course, there will be a config file to manage your configuration. So actually, let's start from there. So it will be under the root folder, which will be like this one, cypress.config. And you can introduce some these are my custom environmental variables, so you can introduce some environmental variables and then dynamically change it and or even read it from the config file. And other than that, you can manage the other variables, like if you want to take a video during the executions, or whenever the screenshots are taken after the execution is done, where you can find them. You can address the folder where the screenshots are kept, and the other configuration, like the number of retries whenever the test case is failed, the expected results are not met, the test fails. So there might be some temporary or intermittent issues, so sometimes you might want to re-execute the test case to see if it is a permanent issue or just something temporary. So this is the retry number, and there are two modes in Cypress. You can either open or run. So open is just starts a Cypress runner, so you see all the tests running on the browser. So it is mostly used in local environments, but run is mostly used in the remote machines like CI/CD pipelines. I will show maybe the open mode now, just to see how the tests are executed on browsers, and you can either choose you can even choose the browser on which you want to execute your test case. And let's see some other files which are really very helpful and useful to manage some different executions in Cypress. For example, here we have a support file under which you can define your global hooks. Global hooks are the code blocks which are executed before or after each test suite or individual test case. So if you define your blocks here under the global file, so even if you do not introduce these before or after modules inside the test spec file, they are still executed automatically in each your execution and for each test case. Other than this, we have the plugin file in which you can add some plugins to your test executions. And finally, let's see maybe the commands file. This is also very important, because whenever you define some custom commands, you can define them here. For example, I will add some custom operations here, and if I introduce this as a custom command, I can just type the command name after the Cypress keyword like this, dot, and I just provide my custom command name. In this case, it would be something like is not in viewport. Of course, it will be executable after this file itself is executed, So I will just show how it will look like when it is ready. It will be used just as the other commands which was built in the Cypress package. So of course, first of all, I have to execute this, and then is not in viewport method or the function what is defined here will be available after this file is executed. And when is it executed? Whenever I start Cypress. So these three files, like the on top of the config file, the support file, and the plugin file, and the command file, are executed just at the beginning of your execution. So in this way, you can do your global hooks, you can do your custom commands, and all the other configuration. So I already had a test, which is a very simple Google page automation. Let me show you just to see how it will execute. It will be under, I guess, somewhere here, under playground directory. It is like this. So what I'm doing here is I'm just visiting the Google main page, and then I don't need this for now, but I'll show you how I can debug as well. And then I'm getting some elements on the page, and I'm doing some interactions. So in web automation, the most important thing, or the main fundamental flow, is first of all we locate the elements, we find where the elements we want to interact with is, and then we do our interaction. And I will show you what kind of locators we can use, and then what kind of interactions we can do. For example, if it is an input type element, then we can type into the text field or text area, or if it's a clickable button or any other menu item or selectable item, then we can click or do some selections. So first of all, let's execute this one. So I will open the Cypress open mode. Let me a little bit zoom in here. Cypress not found. If you did not introduce this alias, sometimes you have to run with the npx, which is the command to execute your npm applications, the node package applications. So when I run this, it started in my other screen, so let me move here. We can see the Cypress runner here. So now there are two types of testing, which is the component testing, which is like a unit level testing, and the E2E testing, which is like a system or acceptance level testing. So let's go with the E2E testing. And here I can select the browser on which I want to execute my test case. So let's go with the Electron, which is a very lightweight browser. And when I start this, I can see all my spec files. So why do I see these directories? Because I made this selection. This is my decision, right? If we go back to the config file, this is actually where I define the directories under which these spec files will be found. So these are the directories. So if I go back to the runner, here I'm seeing all the relevant directories. So my Google test is under playground, so it was this one. So let's execute this one. When I click, it just starts executing. So it went to the main page, it typed some queries in the text area, and then it just click on the button, and we see now we are on the results page. So the execution is already successful, and it is still waiting for responses, but we don't have to wait for the ultimate result. So let me show you how we can debug, because debug is also very important. Sometimes we have to see in what status we are or what kind of progress we already made. So for that I have to add a debug line here or anywhere, it will be act like a breakpoint. So you can add this command to wherever you want, and these are actually chainable, which means you can add after any other Cypress command. So I don't have to start a new line or start a new Cypress command, but just continue after the last Cypress command. Let's now try to debug. Again, I'm going with Electron browser and I'm finding my spec file again. It will be this one. And when I start the execution, it didn't stop in the breakpoint that I added, right? Normally I had a debug, which is a breakpoint after visiting the google.com, but it just was not considered in my execution because there's an important thing here. In the browser itself, on the Cypress runner, I have to start inspection mode. If I right click and if I click the inspect, this will be the inspection mode, so I can see all the elements on the page. Like for example, if I inspect this, the relevant code block will be highlighted, and I can use the console to execute some commands or to watch some variables that I have. But after I start the inspection mode, now I can do my debug. So let me start it again. Yes, now it is paused in debugger. We can already see. So now I can watch all the progress here. If I have any variable, like I guess in the spec file I don't have any, but let's just introduce one here. And now let's try to print something. No, A is not defined. Alright, and then yay. So if I had already this variable in my spec file, I would just try to see the value, current value, to see in which status I am, and if it will be updated in the next steps in my test execution, then I would be able to see all the progress. And after I'm done, after I ensure everything is going in the correct direction, I can continue my execution. It will be continue until the next breakpoint, but since I don't have any, now it will just continue until the end. But now I guess it will fall into timeout because I just stopped in debug and I wait for too much time. But this is the basic way to execute the debug mode. So I will not wait for the completion of the test execution, but this was just the basic demonstration of executing test cases with Cypress. Let me show you some more hints now. I previously had made a presentation regarding this. Let me quickly show it. So it should be like here. I can share these slides as well, but going through here. This is one important tip. Whenever we are running our Cypress execution, we can add lots of different arguments to our execution and config variables. So we can pass the spec file, because in open mode, which is opening the Cypress runner, we can manually select the spec file that we want to run. But in run mode, normally if we don't pass any specific spec file, then all the meshed or all the found spec files will be executed. But we can pass any specific file, or we can even use wildcard. So any spec file matching to our query will be executed in that case. Other than that, we can pass the browser, and we can pass some custom environmental variables. These are all and my custom variables that I introduced in my config file. Other than that, what I can show is these are the global hooks. I told about this, and this is very important. So these are the page interactions. So how can we find the elements, and what kind of interactions we can do? So these are all the types of interactions that we can make. And let me, I guess it is in the next slide. Yes. So this is this basic structure of the selectors or the locators. So firstly, we can pass the parent element. It is not necessary, it's not mandatory, but just to make our selection more specific, we can pass them. And then after a space, we can start the element that we want to find. So for that, we can start with tag name, which can be a division or input label, form, button, anything. And then after a dot sign, we can just pass the class name. But again, this is not mandatory. So we can just pass the one of the attributes that the element have with the key of the attribute, and then with the value that it has, we can just pass. So by skipping the parent element or the tag name or the class name, we can just pass this. So it can be like, by the way, let me quickly show one of them actually. So in this way, it will be better understood what I'm talking about. So let's go to google.com again, which I was trying to do in my recent test automation. So if I'm trying to interact with this element, I have to find the locator, the relevant locator. So it will be this one. So the tag is text area. So what I can type is basically here text area. Oh, what did I type here? Cool. And of course it will be inside quotes, single or double quotes, it doesn't matter in this case. And what else? The class name is this one. This will already work, but I can continue to pass some other attributes, like what kind of attributes it has. For example, it has the name Q. Perfect naming from Google. Name. Sorry. First the key, and then the value. Name was Q. Yes, this will already work. But again, of course, every one of them is not mandatory. This will again work, but only if it is already unique. If there are some other elements with the same name, of course, Cypress will return multiple number of elements. And in that case, you can continue with the relevant index like I do here. So if multiple elements found matching to this query, then you can select the relevant index. Or there are some other commands like finding the first or the last. Moving on, what else we can talk about? After performing all the steps, we can do some assertions. So we can use the assertions that was built in the Cypress package, but additionally we can use the Mocha assertions as well. Mocha is another test framework or library used in JavaScript. So we can basically use assertions coming from Mocha as well. Those would be the expect assertions. So let me try to find where I noted it. Is it in my web page? Let me see what I noted here. So this was just the installation, okay, and running the test cases. Here, yeah, I noted the assertions. So you can basically use the should, which is the built-in Cypress assertion, or the expect method, which was coming from the Mocha assertions. So in this way, you can basically match the actual results with the expected results. So I guess this was Cypress execution in a nutshell. It is just a very basic, very simple demonstration. There are lots of different details for Cypress, but it is just the highlights and some important hints, I guess. And if you are interested, there was a live coding demonstration I made previously, so you can reach out from this link, I guess.